Lep dober dan in pozdravljeni na letošnjem Instant KULTu, kjer imamo v gosteh danskega avtorja, Stefana Kruseja Jørgensena, ki je tukaj z nami v prvi vrsti. Ogledali si bomo 3 njegove filme, ki so v bistvu tako ali drugače povezani s stroji oziroma pač tehnologijo, čez katero je posredovana oziroma ali posredovana človeška izkušnja ali pa ta tehnologija oziroma stroji služijo kot neki produkciji te človeške izkušnje. Tukaj so v bistvu, se boste videli, ne, njegov prvi film se precej razlikuje od tistih naslednjih dveh, ki imate v bistvu potem, se precej ukvarjata tudi z nadzorom in vidnostjo, ampak o vsem tem bomo več rekli tudi v pogovoru z avtorjem po projekciji.
Samo tebe nazva, da ne vidim, nego bi rekel dinamično.
This was Instant KULT with Stefan Kruse Jørgensen, and to begin with, how does one come from excessive bulk to a lack of clarity, or maybe what were your preoccupations then when you were starting that, and maybe how it evolved to, or maybe migrating image, let's say. What was this like connection?
Yeah, so previously I used to, my introduction to film was music videos and making visuals for friends of mine, musicians, and I always had an urge to do very weird stuff, I think, and later on I realized that there was this term called experimental filmmaking, and I totally connected to work of that I was exposed to quite late in my life, actually. And when I made the first film you watched, was I was in beginning of my master degree, and yeah, it was a kind of I was studying in a design school, visual culture studies, and this was a kind of spontaneous idea, a film made in 2 days, and an idea to play with words and memories, and kind of an idea to reconfigure this receipt printer that you see. Usually these are in supermarkets and stuff, so I wanted to, what if I give myself a receipt of all the things I'm getting rid of. I was moving at that time, so I was like getting rid of a lot of stuff, and then I wanted this, okay, maybe I can let go, maybe I can write my immediate emotions to these objects, and let's see what comes out of that. So it was very much an experiment. And then in my studies I started studying or reading more media theory and being introduced to filmmakers like Harun Farocki, and reading Willem Flusser, who is quoted in the beginning of The Migrating Image, and also seeing works by Harun Farocki like Inextinguishable Fire, a film about the Vietnam War, but where he focuses more on the production of napalm. Like he completely shifts the view of like where we usually don't look when we make a film about the Vietnam War. And so at the time when I started the migrating image was 2017, so the news was constantly filled with images of refugees. My screen was constantly filled with it. And the amount of images and the pace of them was so overwhelming that I thought maybe I can take these images out of their original context and try and use some of the theory that I'm reading to understand them or to talk about them differently. And so that's when the idea to focus on sort of the infrastructure of images, the migration of images instead of people, and what does that do to us as receivers. And yeah, basically, I think the biggest question in the film is basically, does the image, how much does the image create the reality that we then create our politics and how we talk about it from?
Yeah, I think this is like one of the main characteristics of your cinema. This questionings, especially in the migrating image, what does actually produce? You know, because you take a look on the side of the migrants, like the production of images that trigger, you know, their migrating, but also on the European side with and I also like it a lot that you tackle, you know, this audiovisual language that we maybe take for granted, but really frames our experience, emotions, and everything that you have in your film. This realizing of yeah, these productions of our subjectivities in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I think somehow the film is also sometimes stating the obvious of like what you see, but actually I found that a very helpful tool to start analyzing something very, at least like visually, it's you. What you see is what you get, but then again not, because if we start addressing for instance, there's a lot of military cameras that also, these images also went to the media, like the refugee boats. And what does it mean when we see military footage? Like what is the subconscious? How do we absorb them subconsciously? And I think, you know, obviously the thing in the military camera must be some kind of danger. So it was also, in a way, yeah, trying to really address these things that are not, they don't make the news.
Now that you mentioned it, in lack of clarity, you also tell how you know this not Steadicam really, but kind of originated in Second World War. So now you're really connecting like this in a way military equipment and or maybe surveillance equipment, as we can see, and the cinematic effect. So how do you see this? I mean, where do you see the options of this for the use in arts that these new technologies give us? Like, for example, the thermodynamic camera you introduced in the lack of clarity.
Like how we can use it in art or in creative expression?
Yeah, but I mean not necessarily this thermodynamic camera, but because you're referring to technologies that get like implemented then in cinema. So what kind of possibilities do you see like with technologies that we encounter like in nowadays? I mean.
No, I think like the drone is a good example of something that's in most TV series now being used to create these aerial footage that you also see in the film. Yeah, I think there's there's a technological development that happens in the military, and the sort of feat, it's still going on. Like, I think that these newest cameras that I've seen are like now cameras that more or less can eradicate like nighttime, like make nighttime into daytime. A little bit like what the thermal camera is doing, but with colors and stuff. I guess I just have a fascination with this and how it, throughout time, transferred into cinema, or it has a parallel life, even in terminology and so forth. Yeah.
Mentioning nighttime and daytime, it's you have in your movies, I mean, especially in the last two movies, you have constantly borders and like moving of these borders, like between internal, external, like in a way you can now with the thermodynamic camera, you can see inside the body and stuff. So how was playing with that? Why did you play with that? What's the thing that triggers you, intrigues you in this shifting dynamics of borders between also day and night?
Yeah, I think the narrative, for lack of clarity, for instance, it came very intuitive, and it came very like one thing led to the next, and so actually the dream that I describe in the film, for instance, let's call that the inner of the borders, was immediately I immediately was reminded of that dream, because I used to have this dream a lot. And then I was like, okay, I have to put that in the film. And then at the same time, I was also dealing with lack of sleep, sleeplessness. And on the other hand, I was reading this book about Paris being lit up, and then, yeah, going from the personal story over into this historic part, and then maybe connecting the dot of the beginning of artificial light up until now, where like this growing, or this accelerated growing of surveillance technologies that we see everywhere, became like I think also because for me the film is kind of like a dream, or it jumps in space and time. It constantly confuses you. Maybe it's in Paris, but it's actually in Las Vegas, and that's why I think, yeah, I was also talking to a friend while making the film, and he was experimenting a lot with lucid dreaming, and he described this kind of, and also I have had dreams like that, but where you think you know what you see, but then you don't, and then you're away, and so yeah, that became the leading sort of the northern light of the structure of the film. And at one point I was too deep into it that I was like, okay, I have to just see how, yeah, if this narrative works or not. But yeah, it had to play up to the artificiality of the image also, and that was my attempt to do that, I think.
Mentioning all this, I mean, it's very interesting and also cool for me with your movies that they are dealing with political and social issues, but especially with the lack of clarity, they're so really deeply personal. So how do you combine these two?
Yeah, it's I think I'm interested in that the border between those two things, and to make films that can encompass both my own body and my own mindset and my own sort of reflection with topics of surveillance or the military industry complex. In this sense, like, they're two very separate things, but I think it's one of the main things I'm interested in also writing for films is like, how do I create stories that encompasses both. And yeah, I guess the essay format is good for this, but also it's important for me, I think, to put myself somewhere in the films. So that's also why I narrate them and put my own position and my own vulnerability up against something that's very sterile. And actually, these clips are just, it's a camera test. They're testing the cameras to show for potential bias. so in a sense it's a very sterile, consumeristic clip we're watching. But when I was watching it, I was seeing so much more than a camera test. I was seeing all these different kind of emotions of sadness or loneliness, and how we've constructed Western society into these grid systems. And so yeah, it made me think also a lot about my own. I think, you know, also the title for me refers to like, where are we going from here? Like, can we even see the future, or is this the optimal way to live even?
How do you how did you even found this footage? Okay, maybe for migrating image was easier, or not. I don't know. You should tell. But yeah, also the lack of clarity, because yeah, this is everything is found footage.
Yeah, I think with the lack of clarity was I actually had the intention to make another film, but the migrating image kind of got me more interested in this military aesthetics and these obscure websites that I would end up on. So I had the idea to make a kind of landscape film of border cameras with nobody crossing it, that was the idea for the film. And researching for that, I came across this company, which is an American company, and they also had this very crazy website full of like taglines like, if you're hunting for hawks in the desert, in the forest, or terrorists in the desert, this is the camera for you. We support the great American military. Of course, they are a pro-war company in a sense. Yeah, I was immediately caught by these images, because also going through a lot of companies and institutions, usually what you find is full of music or testing some weird camera in a desert and stuff. But this had some, I don't know, also a tenderness to it, also aesthetically, and so that was the contrast for me was interesting. And so I immediately knew that and I'm sounding very confident, but that I could make a film from this. But when I saw it, yeah, I immediately started writing, and I started putting it together. Yeah.
So in migrating image, you also mentioned this Frontex company that surveils the borders of Europe, right? How did migrating image is 2018, right?
Yes.
Now we are 3 years later. What's going on with them? How did they develop? Are you will you also research this further, or make films with their footage?
Yeah, I have at least an idea now because I have been going back, even looking at where I found the Frontex clips of the people working, and they since 2015-16 the budgets of Frontex have skyrocketed. So now they are researching a lot into AI-based border control, unmanned drones, like basically creating a bigger distance between them and the refugees, and most sort of ethical or institutions are questioning this a lot, and also the amount of money coming from military industry into the border patrolling. Like, that was never the original intention of Frontex, actually, to have armed and AI-controlled lie detector tests and so forth, like crazy stuff. So yeah, I have an idea right now I'm researching on this specific drone that is now patrolling an unmanned drone, the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, there's a lot of questions and layers in that I want to dive into.
But this is just one drone, or what?
They bought two, I think, from Airbus and some Israeli military company for like, I don't know, 500 million euros or something, like really, really expensive. But yeah, they're military drones, and they used to have manned aircrafts. So yeah, for me it's also brings up a lot of questions of, you know, how do we what are these borders out in the sea, and how do we, like, maybe all the way back to the construction of the map and flattening the earth and colonial times and stuff.
A ima kdo kako vprašanje v tem momentu še? Does anybody have any question?
Did anybody sue you until now?
Not yet, not yet. No, I haven't had any. With the migrating image, I was trying to actually contact all the image producers, but obviously I didn't hear from Frontex. I didn't hear from most of what you see there. So in the end, I decided to make the film anyways, and yeah. That's also why I don't mention the company in a lack of clarity, because I don't know, it's just an unnecessary risk. But at the same time, I think these films will never go to TV, because I've heard from some lawyers that then I could be in more trouble. But in this case, it's really, not a problem.
Yeah, please.
In the first film, on the list of things, there is a DVD of Dead Man, and you say, this work of art is the opposite of me. What do you mean?
Yeah, actually, because when I did the exercise, I just had all the objects and I looked at them, and then I wrote my immediate emotion. And I think actually I'm referring to the cover art. So not the film, yeah. But when I rewatched it also, I was like, I should have, but it happened so fast, I just, because actually, I liked it, man. Yeah.
Anybody else should go?
Yeah, I could try also another one. Like you've been asked about this kind of creative transition in between the first and second film, but I'm more interested about this kind of transition in between the second and third one. You've been asked something about it, but it's kind of obvious for me. Some of these films I watched a couple of times, Migrating Image first time, but for me it was pretty obvious this change in the structuring of voiceover part, and I suppose that part of this decision is dependent by subject also, but in Migrating Image this voiceover is pretty informatic and kind of documentary kind of style thing, and in Lack of Clarity it's pretty much personal and kind of intimate. So I'm just questioning is like the root of this transition or like change. Is it just the subject or something else happening?
Yeah, good question. With the Migrating Image, I remember having written a different narration actually that was more poetic also and had like more my emotions into them, mixed with the more didactic analysis of images. But in the end, somehow I couldn't make it work somehow. I don't know, it seemed too separate, and I wanted the focus in that film more to be on the concept of removing these images from their context and talk about like who made them, why did they do it, and for whom are these images intended for. So in the end, I stayed more on the ground of maybe more classical documentary narration in a way. At the same time, I also had an edit with a female voiceover, and this is like very clean commercial voice. And for me that became too stale. I also remember I was like, because the images themselves are already harsh to watch, some of them. So that's why I ended up narrating it myself with, I don't know, it grounded for me the film a little bit better. And I think with the Lack of Clarity, I definitely became more attentive also to voiceover, because the Migrating Image was my first attempt to have the voiceover. And so having watched the film many times, I became like, that's how the tone is here, and I became more attentive to tone, I think, to pauses, and to, also I wanted to put myself in the film, so in the end, that's also why we, even in the sound design, we played with this dictaphone idea of like, is the narrator talking to himself or is he talking to an audience? I wanted to have that ambiguity in the voice, and also incorporating not only the voice but the whole body. So that's why you sometimes hear something's being moved, there's a cigarette being lit up, and I wanted this idea of like a person in a room alone, and the body. Yeah.
Another question from anybody? You also mentioned this is going to be some kind of trilogy from migrating image, lack of clarity, and what's next then?
Yeah, so that's actually the drone project that I mentioned. Yeah, hopefully it will be a film. I'm also looking into working with installation and having more elements, like working. Yeah, maybe hopefully also it will be a film that has a beginning and an end. But I'm also looking into working more spatially with this project.
And do you also intend it to somehow personally engage yourself as with the lack of clarity, where somehow you interlapse with this historical maybe narration and about the surveillance and stuff, and with the narrator state and questioning his dreams and stuff, or is it going to be maybe more migrating image? Like,
yeah, it's a good question, because it's not made yet. But I think hopefully it will be some kind of mix, or that's, yeah, depending on how the project also develop. In the end, it has to fit with what story I end up constructing. At the same time, I'm also thinking about other projects, and maybe also, if when hopefully the trilogy is finished, looking into working more with the recorded image, and also different projects that will definitely maybe be more personal stories, and yeah. But at the same time, I really want to. For me, it makes sense to make this the last film that in this trilogy, because for me, it can connect the first one with the second one, and then like the outcome, and talk about the military industry complex, also feeding Frontex, and of course it's going to be about migration also. So yeah, that's why I want to make that film.
But you are also making some other film that it's somehow finished, unfinished. We couldn't unfortunately see today. Can you maybe tell a bit more about it?
Yeah, so this is not the trilogy film, but another project. Yeah, it's a film. It's a film about also about dreams. Actually, about lucid dreaming. It's a I would say also a small experiment. Like, it's a recorded conversation between two brothers, and one brother is talking a lot about how he's been experimented with lucid dreaming, and how he's experiencing life in a way, and the dullness of life. And then yeah, it's some kind of random conversation that goes many places, and it touches upon many things that I really wonder about a lot. Even like how to he's addressing the topics like, how do you live life? Like, do you add power to it, or do you are you more this meditation person that let life happen around you? And so I think I have it. Yeah, in that sense, it's also topic-wise, it's looking into these corners where I want to make films about, that are the less talked about kind of shadow topics that's sometimes hard to have in like normal life, like media production of refugees. Like, no one really talks about that over a coffee or something.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting for me, because in your movies you deal a lot with this penetrating the human body with its surveillance and everything, but like something you cannot like push this border until the end. Something is like staying on the other side. It's also when watching your films, they also reminded me about the movie called Face It. I think it's a German documentary that deals with the surveillance camera on Berlin metro station, and with this collecting data that we really don't know what will happen with them in 10 years when the computers will be even stronger. And that's so I'm thinking about, you know, this dichotomy, how much can you achieve with algorithms and putting everything in data. Can you transform, you know, like the world into some binary mathematical language or not?
Yeah, that's big. I guess people that really support the algorithm and the technical development of the algorithm would argue that we can. I also heard the counter argument. I think for me, and also with a lack of clarity, like algorithmic biometric surveillance is something we should be super scared of, actually, because if we take the human even out of that equation, where does that leave us? Where is our freedom in the end? And so, yeah, and also with, I don't know, the development of the internet, you know, it used to be, the idea of the internet was to make this new place, new democracy maybe, a free space, and look what it turned into, you know. We are all kind of data sheeps, and of course there are also many benefits of the internet. I'm not a hater. I'm not a hater, no, I'm using it, and also I couldn't have made these films without it. But more, you know, the monitoring of it, the data logging and so forth. It seems like data is the new oil, so that's where all the technology is put into more surveillance. Like Spotify recently announced they had this new technology where they can, you know, sense your mood actually from what's going on, from recording it, and then they can give you, if you're sad, a nice playlist, you know. But what are the consequences? And you know, do we need all this shit? But of course, these companies, they put money into it because data, they need to find constantly new ways to get more data. The more data, the more money. So, yeah, it needs for sure regulations if the algorithm has to not turn us into, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that was also the reason why I mentioned in this conversation your personal approach, because I think you, because when I watched your movies, one of my thoughts was also like some of these contemporary philosophies that maybe want to transcend subjectivity, to like to perceive like human just as another object between objects, which can be calculable, whatever.
Calculate.
Yeah,
I can't even say it.
Okay, we know what we mean. But that's what I especially appreciate with your movies, that you deal with this, but you don't reduce it to it, because they all have very strong personal note.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I think, yeah, for me it grounds the film, that it also refers to the present in the sense of me. I guess I'm the present voice in the film, but also I think sometimes for me it's helpful to also address the past when we talk about the future or even the present. That's why I like to use theory also as a kind of motor for my writing, and I think sometimes history and theory can really be a helpful tool for me, even to like understand the world I live in now. Like with the quote of Willem Flusser in the beginning of The Migrating Image, a book he wrote in 1984. He's talking about these dangers of the photograph and how it can it can shift our world into, like, we become delusional with the image and we start living for the image, where in the past, like, we made the image so that we could orientate ourselves. And for me, it's like, wow, it's such a strong statement 30 years ago. And yeah, I feel like media illiteracy is really a problem, that we can't decipher what we're seeing in the news or on the internet. Like, one thing is fake news and deep fakes and so forth, but actually even the photograph in itself, we should be more, I think, we should interpret it more like sometimes we interpret art, or how we talk about it. Like, who made it? Why did they make this? For which newspaper is it? And what are the economic infrastructures of that, and so forth?
Any last questions? Maybe. Še kako vprašanje? Nič, pol bi se pa lepo zahvalil vsem za obisk, da ste prišli. Program, ne vem točno, koliko je ura, ampak mislim, da se dosti kmalu začenja na ploščadi tudi FeKK bal. Se pa še enkrat zahvaljujem vam za obisk in Stefanu, da se nam je pridružil. So thank you everybody for coming to the screening of our jury member and guest on our festival, Stefan Kruse. Shortly on there will begin the FeKK bal free competition program, and thanks again for coming and showing your films.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation also. Thank you. Thank you.